The United States ranked 14% as a world power in financial literacy. So I believe it's become a financial literacy crisis in America. And I don't think the private and the public sector are really doing anything about it and more or less ignoring the problem.
So, why do you think it's become such a problem? Is it because nobody is having the conversation? There's not enough motivation? What do you think is at the source of it?
I think the pinpoint of the problem comes in our educational system. There's only 6 states in the United States that require a full year of financial awareness as a course. And you think about it, we go to school, we learn about English, math, science every year, right?
Hmm.
But where's the finance piece? There's no class that's consistent and that can help people comprehend and attain the level of financial awareness they need. Since the subject is so broad, you really need repetition. And if you only hear about it once and you have a class in high school, you certainly can't take that one class and bring it into your adult life and your working life and execute what you've learned. So I think a lot of it has to do with the educational system, as well as the financial service industry doesn't really spend a lot of their budget educating Americans today. I mean, the research said they spend 3% educating, and a lot of their money goes to marketing products. So investors are left with feeling a little bit insecure and uncertainty, and almost even shameful and anxious about not knowing financial knowledge.
It's funny you bring up the classes as math and science and so on and so forth, because to me, financial literacy and financial health is not very different from physical literacy and physical health, right? Like
Hmm.
and
Yep.
physical fitness is also a very broad subject, but we go to school and we take the gym class and
Oh,
we learn
yeah. Good point.
the fundamentals of it. Like, we may not learn every single thing you can do as an athlete, but you will learn how to stretch, right? And how to
Yep.
do a push up and how to do a sit up, and those basic, maybe 8 exercises that are enough to really keep you above water pretty much the rest of your life, right? If you're not going to be a professional athlete. So I find it interesting that there must be some fundamental skills that you can acquire at a very early young age and have that repetition. Maybe it's things like budgeting. Maybe it's things like managing a small sum of money and splitting it up between your main expenses. And most importantly, having the discipline to execute a plan, even on a small scale. It's strange to me that it hasn't been a priority. And people have been taking it into their own hands now to educate themselves, in many ways leaning on resources such as your book, the internet and social media. Like, do you think that outside of the educational system, there is enough information now for people to educate themselves and take those steps on their own?
I think action steps is great in the engagement process, but I also think a little bit of the problem in the financial literacy crisis we have today is the digital age. People have access to information, okay? But the question is, how do you decipher information into knowledge and execute it in your own personal situation? With the digital age, you can pretty much Google anything today to agree with what you're thinking. So I think it comes down to having a financial professional. And I also like to call I don't like the word financial planner as much as I like today financial coach. Someone who is going to motivate you and inspire you to set your goals, monitor those goals, and make sure you stay engaged and accountable. Because, a lot of people hire an advisor and say, well, you do it, and I don't really need to know anything about it. You're the expert. I think that is a missing component in my industry, sitting in this business over 35 years. I don't think investors are engaged enough. Maybe because they don't know about the subject and they feel a little insecure and intimidated. So they prefer just to throw it off to the advisor. And that's fine, but I think the engagement process needs to be not only with the financial advisor and the coach, because we are just here to guide you, motivate you, and structure your goals and objectives. Investors need to know what questions to ask. So how do you ask questions? You get educated, because knowledge is power. And that's how the wealthy elites have made so much money. They've taken the time to get engaged, to learn, to ask questions, and to be curious. And it's not that you need to be the expert, but you need to be engaged enough to know what questions to ask.
What would you say are some of the top questions that a starting out investor perhaps should seriously contemplate and ask?
Well, as I talk about in my book, investors need to think of financial literacy in two themes. The first is what you mentioned earlier, basic financial concepts. And I call that micro. And there's tons of books out there, Susie Orman, David Ramsey. There's a lot of books that people can pick up and spend 5 minutes a day and use those resources to build an emergency fund, because a lot of people were caught off guard with COVID. Set up a budget and reduce your debt. So that's the one theme of the book that I really don't go into deep, because there's so many books out there. What I have found when I was doing research about the macro side of financial literacy, there were no books out there, zero. So I know that this contribution to the financial industry that I've made with me and Dr. Georgie, my collaborator, my researcher, is a book that investors need to get engaged with. What political and economic forces are creating part of the crisis, not only the financial literacy crisis, but the retirement crisis today, and how they can fight those forces. Because that comes down to your investment choices you make, whether that be stocks or bonds or other asset classes. So I want to introduce the macro piece of financial literacy and explain things that people hear about every day on TV, and have someone put it all together for them in the last 50 years and what's happened in the past that's going on today that will affect your future, and how can you use that information to build a sustainable investment strategy that can sustain you without fear, based on facts, and leave a legacy for your loved ones. So that was the motivation in giving that information to the public.